Thank you so much for inviting me here. I am very sorry that I do not speak Italian. I have to visit your beautiful country and I have to speak to you in English. I'm sorry. So I have been asked to talk to you about learning analytics, but also about teaching in a way that will help support using learning analytics. So this is not a technical talk so much as a pedagogy or a teaching kind of talk. And I hope that this will meet your needs. My name is Elisabeth Dalton. I have been working with Moodle HQ for 3.5 years as a research analyst. And before that, I worked for a small university in the United States that taught primarily adults. These are people for whom education has already failed. They have tried to go to university and it did not work out, or they never had a chance to go. And in the place where I live, there are more trees than people. I think we now have more people than cows, but the cows don't want to go to university and the people do, so I am more concerned about the people. And so we have a lot of distance learning happening. And this means that we have many courses that are fully online. Some of what I show you will reflect that experience with the fully online courses, but some other things are also things that you can use in your course face-to-face with Moodle, or as things in between your face-to-face meetings that you can do with Moodle. So if you have, how many people were able to go to Barcelona? Did we have very many? Just a few, okay. How many people have seen Martin speak either in person or on video in the last 2 or 3 years? Everybody, right? Okay, so you all know that Martin is very keen on saving the world through education, and I believe this too. And in particular, he talks about the UNESCO Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular, goal for quality education for everyone in the world. I think if I tried to ask you, raise your hands if you think this is a good idea, everybody would put their hand up, and so we'll just move on from there. But we want to be able to measure the quality education. So it's great to say, we will have quality education, but how can we measure it, and how can we predict? How can we tell if we are delivering quality education? Learning analytics can help with this. Learning analytics can help us to see what we cannot easily see, either because it is an event in the future, or it is an event that's very difficult to detect in the present. For example, we might be looking for evidence of collaboration, or we might be looking for some kind of success at the end of the course. These are both very difficult to see directly. But this leaves us with this question: what is quality education? And this is not a simple question to answer. And in fact, there are multiple answers, and they are all valid. So what I am going to talk about a little bit today is 4 different ideas of education and how Moodle supports them, and how you can use Moodle to deliver on these different promises that education makes. And then by doing that, you will enable the ability to use learning analytics to predict success according to your definition of quality. But first you have to know what you mean by quality. So these are the 4 general ideas that I will talk about. We have our academic education, where we are identifying and encouraging the best scholars. We have our pragmatic education, where we are preparing our students to be productive citizens in society. We have an individualist model, where we are encouraging each individual learner to unfold in their own way and grow according to their own needs for their whole lives. And then we have the idealist. This is a picture of people picking up trash at a beach, where we are trying to encourage our learners to adopt values and to take those values out into the world and to feel empowered to fix the world. I think that's the one Martin is usually thinking about, but there is a place for all four of these. And as we go through, I think you will see for yourself that in your own practice, you can never just do one of these. There will always be a combination. And in two different contexts, the course that you teach, the course your child is taking in school, you may have different priorities, and this is okay. The important thing to remember is you will not be able to measure or predict with analytics unless you know which of these things you are trying to do, because they are measured in different ways and they are delivered in different ways. So let's talk a little bit about this. So we have this long tradition of academic scholarship, and the idea of academic learning is to find the best students who will become scholars, who will become teachers or researchers. We understand that there will be a grade curve. We are very much focused on the highest performing students, and some students will fail, and we accept this. This is one model of education. If your university or your school has promised your students that if they have what it takes to be the top scholars, you will help them develop that. If you are promising them that if they get a high grade or mark at your institution, everyone will know that means they are the best, then this is the model that matters to you. And the things that we care about with this model are not so much all of the students will complete, but that all of the students will be accurately assessed, that the assessments will be very honest and very fair and very accurate. So we look for things like their grades probably correlate with their GPA. Their grades follow a normal curve. And in this model, time on task indicates engagement. Now this is going to see, we're going to see a contrast here. So more time on task in the academic model indicates that the student is really engaged with the content. They're spending a lot of time reading and reflecting and writing, and this is all good for deep engagement. And we probably hope that our students will graduate on time, and our top students will go on to pursue academic careers. Yay! So how can Moodle support this? Well, one of the big tools that we have, that you have all used, I am sure, is the quiz. But how many of you have looked at the quiz report? There is a detailed report for quiz, and it shows you the psychometric properties of every question in your quiz. It tells you things like how difficult is the question compared to other questions in your quiz, and how closely does success on this question correlate with success on the whole quiz. And that gives you an idea of the performance of the item. So we have these detailed statistical tools that can help you to make your quizzes as accurate as possible. We also think for the academic field, consistent assessment is very important. So no matter who the person marking an assignment or an essay is, it should be the same. You know, it should always be very consistent. So that's why we have things like advanced grading and rubrics, and now in the forum, we also have this tool. So we try to make it possible to be very clear about what we are expecting our students to do and to challenge them and to be able to mark their work and assess their work in a very consistent way. Another key factor in academic work is correct attribution of sources. Now, some people will say, okay, this is anti-plagiarism. And that is true. But the reason that we care about plagiarism is that in academic work, knowing what your source is and the trail of other research that led to your current state is very important. That's part of the academic tradition. And so we want to make sure that we help our students understand that. The point is not for them to come up with some answer that's correct, but for them to be able to show how they arrived at this answer through the trail of scholarship. So there are tools. This one is an open source tool called Crot. This would be an extra plugin that, that you could add. But of course, we also have the more well-known sponsor of this Moot, Turnitin. So that's one of the tools that's very useful for an academic kind of learning. In the future, there are other things that we might be able to do, and we hope to develop more learning analytics models that will help to measure and predict success on this model of education. We might look at how many of our graduates become teachers, how many of our graduates become scholars, how many of their papers are cited. So that's called the Hirsch index or the H index. So there are different metrics that we might use in the future as targets for our learning analytics models so that we try to design our programs to produce the scholars that every community needs. However, those won't be everybody we need. Now, I would not be an academic if I did not stop at this point and give you some references. These slides will be available later today at moodle.org/analytics. So you certainly may take pictures, but you do not have to. These slides will be available later. So here are a few of my favorite references on the academic model and the facets of education that are most important in that model. And I would also not be an academic if I did not give you an assignment now. So here is your assignment to think about over the next few days, or maybe the next week. Consider how you would design a small experiment to compare how two tools available in Moodle, probably two activities, accurately determine the learning gained by the student, and describe the advantages and disadvantages, and the effort to prepare and the effort to score the assessment, because these are very different, right? And the accuracy and the validity. And cite your references using the standard that is appropriate in your field of work. I have referenced the MLA standard, Modern Language Association standard, just as an example. So I'm serious about this. Give some thought to how you might accurately measure student achievement using different tools in Moodle. You don't have to hand your work in to me, but if you do, I will give you feedback. However, academic learning is not the only kind of learning we care about. We do want to identify scholars. Every community needs its own scholars, but we also need as many people as possible to be prepared to work and live in the world as it is. So with the pragmatic model, we try to attain a goal that all students will achieve some basic competencies, some essential competencies. The learning will be as efficient as possible, the competencies will be assessed by authentic means, and we try to prevent dropouts, because dropouts indicate that our system is not working to prepare all of our learners. So unlike the previous model, the academic model, where we are trying to identify and promote the best scholars, now we want all of our learners to succeed as much as possible. So an important distinction here is that in the academic model, time on task is good. In this model, time on task can indicate that your learning is inefficient. So now we have a direct contrast. If we were trying to use time on task to predict success, depending on which academic model we have, it would mean either a positive or a negative. So we need to keep this kind of thing in mind. This is why it's very important to know what kind of learning you're trying to do and what you have promised your learners, what your learners came to you or their parents came to you expecting, what your institution is saying, and what your heart is telling you. And sometimes these will be in conflict, and you may need more than one learning analytics model in that case. In a pragmatic mode, we start by saying, in this segment, you will learn how to define and link competencies in Moodle, how to support learning that is as efficient as possible, and how to assess competencies by authentic means. I am not going to cover all of these subjects in detail, but that's generally what we're covering. So one of the most important tools to help make learning efficient that Moodle provides to you is access restrictions. I imagine many people here have used them. Is there anyone here who has never used access restrictions in Moodle? Nobody wants to raise their hand. I understand this, and you want your coffee as well. So do I. All right. Access restrictions are a tool that we can use on any element within the Moodle course, any activity or resource that will hide that activity or resource unless certain criteria are met. So we can use this to say, you must pass the quiz for Module 1 before you can move on to Module 2. We can also use this to show or hide a label that says, you may need to work more on Module 1 before you attempt Module 2. So we don't keep them from going to Module 2, but we advise them. And this is how I like to use access restrictions. But there are many things you can do. So something that I also do sometimes is I have a quiz that has my rubric in it for an assignment. And they must complete the quiz before they can submit the assignment. All they do in the quiz is assess their own work using the same rubric, and the quiz is worth 1 point. But they have to go through and assess their own work before they can submit it to me. This has greatly improved the quality of my assignment submissions. So little tricks like this, and you can use access restrictions to make these things happen. You can also use something like lesson with branching. How many people here have used the lesson module in Moodle? So it is very interesting and powerful, but also a little bit complicated to set up. And we do have some developers at Moodle HQ who have made some prototypes that are very interesting and would help to improve lesson. It is not on the roadmap yet to make these improvements, but it's the sort of thing that if the Moodle community were to all stand up and say, we need these improvements to lesson, then it would become a priority. If you all say, never mind lesson, we're just using quiz, then lesson will not get improved. There are many ways to use the quiz tool. So previously I showed assessments that are done with the quiz, and then we look at the detailed statistics of each item. We remove the items that are not performing well. This is assessment for a different purpose. This quiz, the point of the quiz is to provide the feedback. So a student can go through, when they select the wrong answer, they get some specific feedback related to that wrong answer. And this could be very diagnostic. It can help learners to make each pass through the quiz a learning opportunity, not just an assessment opportunity. Of course, it's a lot more work to prepare this, but it does run itself once you get it done. And competency frameworks. Has anyone here used competency frameworks in Moodle? Ah, brave souls. Okay, so it's a powerful tool. It is work to set up. First, you need a framework that lists out all of your competencies. Then you need to go through your course activities and link them to these competencies. But once you have done this, you have the ability to track in detail how well your students are learning across multiple measurements, perhaps even external measurements. So the idea here is we don't really care so much where our students learned something. We only care that a competent practitioner has assessed the learning. So perhaps they learned it before they came to our university or before they came to our school, and that's fine. As long as they can demonstrate that they can do something, then we give them credit and we have them move on. This is again about pragmatic learning and making it as efficient as possible. So the model that we include out of the box with Moodle is a student at risk model. The default model is students at risk of dropping out, which has very few assumptions. We don't assume that you are even keeping all your grades in Moodle. The only thing we assume, and unfortunately this hits a lot of you, is that your course has a start date and an end date. And I know many of you do not use courses this way, but we had to start somewhere. This model could be adapted to work from enrollment start date and end date instead of course start date and end date. That would help many of you. but not all of you. And we are still working on ways that we could improve this kind of model for this pragmatic purpose of trying to help as many students as possible be successful in the course, complete the course. When we want to try to measure as authentically as possible, sometimes we will use things like H5P simulations. And as you have seen, we are now able to include these simulations within Moodle using a simple filter. Or you can still use the existing plugin if you need to pass a result back to Moodle. This cannot easily be used for high-stake assessments, like in the academic model. It's really not designed for that, because H5P conveys a lot of code directly to the browser, and the student, the clever student, can hack that. They can see the answers. But if what you are trying to do does not depend on a short list of true or false answers or ABCD, and what you are trying to do is more of an interactive video to give some feedback to the learner and to try to authentically assess how well they understand something, H5P is a perfectly good solution. And passing a score back can be very helpful. This is not the only way that you would assess somebody's ability to perform a complex task, but it is a way to let them practice that. And perhaps it could be a final assessment if it were very well designed. In the future, we want to continue to support this kind of efficient learning. We're looking at the standards, XAPI and Caliper. These are ways to get information in and out of Moodle from other systems. So they might affect somebody using a different kind of laboratory practice system and feeding its results back into Moodle, or feeding results from Moodle out to a learning record store where you may combine Moodle records with other records and make different predictions. We also think that something like the ability to endorse skills by external people, for example, internship supervisor, without requiring a Moodle login, could be an important feature, because again, this is focused on an authentic assessment. And having to set up a Moodle login for every external authentic assessor is problematic. In the pragmatic goal, we often conclude with a multiple choice assessment. Here is our assessment. We will try to match these three purposes with these three tools. Match the best tool to the purpose out of the three that we have here. That kind of limits it. Okay, so number one, all students will master required competencies. Which of these three tools is the most appropriate for this first goal? How many people say A? Yeah, you're not going to raise your hands. All right, fine. I will just give you the answers in the interest of time. In this first one, I am looking at learning plans. In the second one, learning is as efficient as possible. Restricted access is the tool that I spoke about this morning. And the third, competencies are assessed by authentic means. Of these three choices, the H5P simulation most closely matches that definition out of the things that I have spoken of this morning. All right, let's move on. How am I doing on time? Okay, good. All right. In the individualist model, we step away from objective criteria and we look more at the subjective, and we ask, what are the learner's own goals and how do they want to pursue those goals? How can we help them to grow in their own way, in their own time? And I am sure everyone can think of a kind of learning that they would like to be this way. Typically, young children, we try to teach this way, but also some kinds of university programs are this way, particularly in the arts. There is no objective criteria. It's a matter of helping people grow. In this kind of a model, we care that the learners are satisfied and we care that they improve over time. We want to see that they are growing and that they are able to set their own goals and evaluate themselves, and they are becoming lifelong learners. So, I would like each person, I don't know if this is going to work with this group, but we'll try it. I would like each of you to think now of some particular challenge that you have in your own work with learners. Something preferably involving Moodle that you are having some difficulty solving. So take a moment to think of this. Some kind of challenge in your work that involves teaching or learning with Moodle. And here's the part where nobody is going to answer. Could I have a volunteer? Is there anyone willing to share with me their challenge? I have a volunteer. This is so exciting.
One of the challenges is how to engage a student who is learning via MOOC, because we are developing many MOOCs at my university. So this is one of the challenges, because they are learning self-paced. So
that's a great one. Thank you so much. Can we have some applause for this person who was willing to participate? Thank you. Okay, so our individual challenge, one example of a personal challenge that I'm going to try to speak to now is engaging students in a large format course like a MOOC, where they are operating on their own schedule and probably they're not going to get a lot of individual attention from the teacher. What can we do to make that course more engaging? So there are some specific things that we might try to help this gentleman with his problem. Do we have any suggestions? Shall I go ahead and just make suggestions? A hall of fame. Yes, so this is the kind of thing where when students are opting to take a course, it's not required, it's something they are choosing to do, a hall of fame can be a good example. Does anyone here use Duolingo? It's a language learning app, yeah? And so it sends me these messages saying, you are going to slip off of the top 20 or the silver level or whatever it is. So these kinds of things can help with self-motivating students. Another suggestion, does anybody have any other ideas that we might use to help with this kind of challenge? Okay, so some other examples are setting a checklist perhaps, giving people a way to register their own goals and when they want to get them done. Let's take a look at some tools that are included in Moodle or that are easily installable. So this first example that I have here is a module called Checklist. This is not included in Core, but it is used in the Learn Moodle MOOC. It's well tested. So chances are you may have it available to you. So how many people have used Checklist before? Ever used Checklist? We have a few nods, a few hands, okay. If you have used Checklist, you know that you can automatically import the items that are due in a particular module of the course or whatever. But what you may not realize is that you can enable students to add their own items to the checklist. So they would be able to see the Edit Checklist pane and they can add their own items and their own due dates. And then they can go back later and check them off. So this is a facility that you can offer your learners that makes them very much in charge of their own learning, of deciding what they want to do and when. You can also use the workshop. And workshop has many different modes, and it can be a little tricky to set up. But one of the modes that workshop allows is the ability to assess their own work using a rubric, and then a teacher or a peer can also assess the work, and these assessments are compared. So the ability of the learner to assess work is measured, as well as the work that they have done. So I write an essay, I hand it to Paula, and Paula gives me a grade. And I end up giving a grade to Paula's essay as well. Now I have two grades. One is on my essay, and one is on my ability to assess Paula's essay, and maybe also to self-assess my own. And so these are calculations that Moodle makes for you and gives you back two separate grades. You could use the database tool the eternal tool of tools, and create a little badge database to show what badges do you want to earn and when. And that lets students just keep track of the things that they want to do. So you make sort of a little badge shopping cart. And of course, if you are trying to measure growth over time, one of the tools that you can use is portfolio. Now, there are many different kinds of portfolio, and I'm talking about a specific purpose here. So there is the portfolio that you create to show to someone else, like a graduate school or an employer. Here is my best work. And there is the portfolio that you create for a certification. I need to be able to show that I can do certain things, so I must show one example of each of these things for this certification board for engineering or whatever. But there is also the portfolio that you create for yourself, that you show yourself, here is an early example of my writing, here's a later example of my writing that I think is better, and I have some reflections about how I think my writing has improved over time. This is an appropriate kind of portfolio for this model of learning. So this particular example is the integration with Mahara. And one of the things that I like about the Mahara portfolio is that it aligns with a timeline so learners can click through and see evidence of their work at different times and see how much they've grown over time. Again, this is the portfolio for the learner. The learner may choose to let an instructor look at the material and review it, but it's really for the learner to collect examples of their own work and evaluate their own work and their own growth. And finally, we do care in this model whether students think they're getting what they want out of the course, and one of the best ways we can do that is to ask them. So we can use the feedback module, and you can actually set this at the site level and make a consistent feedback form that you use in every course, or of course you can create it at the individual course level and ask specific questions there. So this kind of thing can help you know, are students getting what they came for? You know, in something like a MOOC, this is very important because you really want to know, did this meet your needs? You came here hoping for something. In the future, there are other things that we might support. There are some examples of assessments, instruments that help us to understand how well students are developing as lifelong learners, as self-motivated learners. And then there are also, this is an app called Super Better. Has anyone here ever used Super Better? Okay, so there's a whole TED Talk about this. And this app lets you set your own goals and give yourself points when you make progress towards achieving those goals. It would be interesting if we could interface this with Moodle, so someone could use this to set their own goals in an app and then measure their progress on that and have it feed back into Moodle in some way, so we would know that our Moodle courses were helping people achieve their own goals. We're not there yet, but those are some areas that we might go in the future. Okay, one more kind of learning that I want to talk about, and this is the idealist. This is where we hope that education will make a big difference in the world, that we encourage our students to commit to ideals and to take action. And when this is happening well, all of the students are participating fully in the course. Nobody is feeling marginalized or left out. The students participate in setting the goals of the course and the assessments. The students commit to some ideals, and they are enabled, empowered to carry that learning to the real world. You are not going to measure the success of this kind of learning with a multiple choice quiz at the end of the course. Not going to happen. Okay, another interactive activity which may not work with this group. But call out, if you will, what are some of the ideals that we have for our students? So as a community here, what do we think is important that our students will have? Yeah.
Yeah. I think all of us one day to succeed in life.
Right. So we want our students to succeed in life, and probably we want them to believe with us that being in our educational program will help them succeed in life. So we want our learners to be able to be self-sufficient. And we want them to feel confident that they can go out and make a living for themselves. What are some other ideals or values that we have that we hope our learners will achieve? A value that we want our learner to adopt?
Inclusion of people with different socioeconomical backgrounds and levels of physical and mental ability.
Thank you. And so this is something that has two factors. We want to be inclusive. We also want our learners to adopt inclusiveness as a value. And we modeled that. We try to show how to be inclusive by being inclusive in our teaching practice. And we hope that our learners will take that value on and be more inclusive out in the rest of the world and act in favor of that. So that's a really good example. Normally I have a flip chart up here and I'm writing these down and we build a list. Can I get maybe one more? Critical thinking, yes. So that's another classic example of a value that we hope our learners will adopt and we hope they will carry out into the real world. They can do a demonstration in class, but we kind of want them to actually use it in real life. Okay, so those are some examples. Here are some of the examples from, again, this is the UNESCO Sustainable Goals. And the values that they are hoping that our education systems will promote and encourage are things like sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, these get to some of the things that you've been talking about, promotion of a culture of peace and nonviolence, global citizenship, appreciation of cultural diversity, and appreciation of culture's contribution to sustainable development, which is a complicated way of saying try to get them on your side. No matter what kind of beliefs somebody has or what kind of cultural traditions somebody has, those could be part of solving the problem. So we want people to be able to see how their own traditions can be brought to bear on solving some of the world's problems, as a way of saying, I'm not coming in to tell you how to do it. I'm coming in to help you figure out how to do it. And that's very much what this model, the idealist model of education, is about. I'm not here to tell you, I'm here to talk with you, and together we'll figure out how to solve this problem. The primary tool that we use for this in Moodle is unquestionably the forum. And we use it to set goals with our students at the beginning of a course. We use it to discuss our ideals during the course. We use it to allow students to give feedback to one another and to us as teachers, as well as we give feedback to the students as well. So for building an online community, this is definitely the strongest tool that Moodle offers. Here is another tool. This is a third-party plugin called Re-engagement. Has anyone here ever used this plugin? Oh, I have. A couple of people. Great. So what Re-engagement lets you do is set some criteria for a point at which you will not just show something in the course, like with access restrictions. You will reach out to the learner and ask them to come back to the course to do something in particular. So the way that this is useful for the idealist learning is that you really want them to take something on and do it in the real world. So my thought here is that we might use re-engagement to ask students, is it okay if we contact you after the course? So let's say we have a course about recycling. Perhaps we've talked about the different kinds of plastics and how they can't be mixed together and how glass is melted down and aluminum is dissolved and, you know, all that. But really what we care about is, do you know how to put stuff in the right bins? But really what we care about is, did you put stuff in the right bins this week? So we tell folks, we are going to ask you next week, just a spot question. You'll come back and do a choice activity. How many times did you recycle today? It's not part of your grade. It's not a yes or no. We just want to remind you and also sort of track a little bit how effective was our teaching. So we can't really assess this on an individual level, but we can assess the course as a whole, the course and the community developed in the course to affect our ideals, like recycling. So the answers might be, 10 things I went around and picked stuff up off the ground and put it in, even if it wasn't my trash. I put a few things in the recycling bin. Oh, I forgot, I'm still working on this. I'll try to do better next time. So we make these very opening, inviting kinds of responses. People can feel okay about picking whichever ones fit them. Here's another third-party plugin. This one was developed by one of our Moodle HQ employees, 360-degree feedback. Are people familiar with the concept of 360-degree feedback? So this is a tool for asking all the other people around you about yourself, and a way of assembling scores, and they are anonymous. So it's a way for many people around you to give you feedback. Like, I wish I could do this right now, and I'd ask all of you, how am I doing? Is my presentation skills and things? And those of you who are participants, the particular people who invited me here, the people back home who might watch this video later, get some different perspectives on how I'm doing. There are various tools that you can use during your class, even if you're teaching in a face-to-face environment like this, like live poll. Now, you can do this also with choice. You can use just the default choice tool, and if your students have the Moodle mobile app, they can vote on something right during class, and then you can show the results. This third-party plugin is a little bit difficult different in that it shows the results live as people vote, and people can change their votes. So you can use this to develop and build a consensus. You can show people some different options. For example, what kind of project shall we all do together? You get some different examples from the group. And then people start to choose options, and you ask people to stand up and speak about the different options that they've chosen or not chosen, and gradually the votes start to shift until you get a strong consensus around a particular option that the group has decided to do together. So this is not really about voting. It's about building consensus and having a tool to see how close we are. There are different things that we might support in the future. For example, social network analysis is a kind of graph that shows how connected our learners are to each other. This is the kind of tool that might be helpful in the future. There are also communities. This is similar to Super Better that I showed you earlier, where you set your own goals, except that you set goals within a community, and the community tries to help you. So this is similar to Fitbit. How many people here have some kind of exercise tracking device? Not so much? Okay, a few people. I have a Fitbit watch, and my husband and I are both in a little group on Fitbit, so we can see each other's steps. This means that even though I've been in Europe for 3 weeks, he and I can see how well we're exercising and send each other little notes of encouragement. So it's a way of being together even when we're far apart. And it's a way of adopting a goal as part of a community, a small community in this case, where we can encourage each other to achieve our goals. So that kind of an interface, or an interface to a tool like that, might be something that we consider in the future for Moodle to encourage this form of learning. The most important thing that I want to emphasize about learning analytics is that we need to pick targets or goals and models that help us not just predict the future, but change it and improve it. So whether your goal is to identify the best scholars, or to help all of your students achieve some basic competencies, or to encourage all of your learners to be lifelong learners and assess themselves, or to try to empower activists who will go out and try to make changes in the real world, you will not be satisfied if you are simply able to predict whether this will happen. If you predict that some number of your students will fail, will drop out of the course, and you are in a pragmatic model and you're trying to help as many students as possible pass the course, it's not enough to just say 12% and you come to the end of the course and yep, 12% of them failed. Yay, our model worked. No. What we want to do is have our model be wrong a certain amount of the time because we took action. So we need our learning analytics systems to offer us the opportunity for action and to track how much of a difference our actions make as we go through using a model. We don't merely want to predict the future, we want to change it. Thank you very much. I think I have about 8 minutes for questions, is that correct? 10 minutes. Okay, so.
A little bit less.
Se volete fare delle domande in italiano, noi possiamo anche tradurre.
Sono domande? Cosa di particolare interesse? I have one.
Great.
I've seen many presentations from you, from Mary Coach, of some very interesting plugins, which I guess it is time to incorporate in Moodle, I think, because they are really very useful. They can improve good teaching practice and learning practice. So probably, why don't you promote some poll just to indicate which should be the most important ones to have in first? Why not?
I think this is a wonderful idea. The question is, where do we publish the poll to make sure that we get a good representative sample of all the people who use Moodle? We don't even know who all the people are who use Moodle. Martin went last year to Africa for the first time and discovered that Moodle is used all over Africa. Who knew? They don't register their sites. How many people here have registered your Moodle site? Thank you. Without that, if you register your Moodle site, we have a contact, and we could make sure to send a poll to this contact. And that person could then distribute it to everyone on their site if they needed to. So that's at least one way. But it's, well, we have the individual communities. I don't know if we have a really good list of all of those communities. We have the Moodle Users Association, and we do actually have a process where they identify things that they want to move forward. We have Moodle.org and all of the open forums there. And we have the bug tracker database. So tracker, tracker.moodle.org, I think, allows you to put in a request and collect votes. And if a request, like incorporate the checklist plugin into Moodle Core, acquires a large number of votes from the community, that is taken seriously. We also try to ask at moots like this, what are the features that you are really missing? What are you using that's a plugin right now that you wish was part of Core? What are your pain points? How could we make Moodle better? We need to balance that against the fact that we really don't have that many developers in HQ. So sometimes we need to partner with the community. And we need to ask, are there some developers here who would like to help us build and test something, including writing the automated test pieces, so that it could be adopted into Core? Even when things are completed and written in the community, sometimes it's difficult to get them into Core. The issue here is we have a shortage of people able to do the peer reviews, and everything we adopt into Core, we have to maintain with that same small number of developers. So it's very important that we have an accurate sense of which are the top priorities of the whole community. And each group, each community has its individual priorities, but we should be able to balance this. So this is something that I am working with the UX team on and trying to get some better input from a broader cross-section of all of our users about what we need to do next in Moodle. And I've been asked to do that by management at HQ. Are there other questions? Anything that you are dying to know about analytics or about some plugin or about whether or not Pluto is a planet.
It's not directly related to analytics, but maybe it may be. I see that in Moodle, Wiki is not used as a constructivist tool. It's more or less like a book editor, collaborative book editor. I think that one of the activity that may improve also analytics is how people participate in editing the knowledge, and the ability to track the process is typical of a wiki in which you have the chronology. Okay, I don't see this tool developed in Moodle. Why?
Have you tried the Open University OU Wiki? Does so is that working a little bit better for you? Yeah. Okay. The point here is that a wiki built into Moodle, but it isn't a truly constructivist wiki. It doesn't offer you as much in terms of viewing people's participation over time and interactions between people. And so sometimes people use the OU Wiki developed by the Open University instead. I would like to see the OU Wiki brought in as a replacement for the wiki with some kind of conversion utility in case people are using the original wiki. I think that there have been plans about that in the past with the various OU tools, because the Open University in the UK has done a lot of development for Moodle. They are the owners of all of the quiz functionality. All of that stuff I showed you with those detailed reports, Open University developed that. So they do get stuff adopted into Moodle, but not always. Again, here we have a question: how many people would use the wiki if we improved it and made it a truly constructivist learning tool? Okay, I'll take a vote. You know, would you be more likely to use Wiki if it were a stronger constructivist learning tool? Okay, so I've got maybe half a dozen of you brave enough to raise your hands. I'm just going to double that and say that there are, say, 12 or 15 people in this room, but I don't know how many worldwide. And to improve the Wiki, do we wait on improving assignment? Do we wait on improving something else? You know, so we always have to balance this. So we need a better way to collect from all of you what your priorities are. And we will be working on that over the course of this year. Do I have